When I first entered Gallaudet as a freshman, I was enrolled in the New Signers Program, NSP, because up until that point I hadn't signed anything. I didn't know any sign language. And my first American Sign Language teacher said this phrase that has stuck with me ever since: if an opportunity ever comes your way, take it, because you never know where it'll lead you. It may be that it leads you to a career path, but if not, then you can at least say you've done it and experienced it, and that has stuck with me ever since. And so I began working and became a choreographer and was beginning to develop all kinds of new dance moves and things that applied to today's, style of hip-hop dancing and moves. And so I thought, well, maybe I can produce some music. And so I began to write some lyrics to hip-hop music. So I began to practice it and thought, oh, well, let me go ahead and try it out. I'd test it out at an open mic night. But at that time, people were not ready for the concept of a deaf rapper, and so they booed me, and it was bad. It was terrible. Deaf and hearing alike. They said there was no way a deaf rapper would succeed. So there was a lot of criticism and negativity that came my way. So my dream of being a music producer and rapper was sort of put aside, but it nagged at me. It was always on my mind, and the desire to do it continued to plague me. Even though I continued my work as a choreographer, that still was my dream. And so finally, over the years, we began to see, here and there, deaf rappers become more successful. And so I thought it was perhaps time for me to get back in the game. And this has always been a visual process for me. I always begin there and add music later. And that's true for me in choreography as well as rap. But I thought I'd try and challenge myself and work from music first and add lyrics, but it's really been a challenge because they're different animals, and it's a totally different creative process. And you have to understand that how hearing and deaf people view rap, it's a different concept, especially with hip-hop. And so we've coined the term dip-hop, and that's the sign for it. Dip-hop, meaning hip-hop through deaf eyes. And so it's a movement that we'd really like to begin to see move into the mainstream as a new genre. And so we'd really like to see it stay, for it to be a new concept and a new way of experiencing music. And I hope that this will be a variety of mediums that people can be exposed to, this dip hop, that voice and sign language and music all come together to create and enhance one's experience in terms of your vision, your perspective, your knowledge, drive, communication. It's just amazing. So as I was growing up, film was my passion. I always wanted to make movies, and I'll never forget the first time I saw The Miracle Worker. You remember the old black and white film about Helen Keller? And, she was played by a hearing actor, but that was the first time I had ever seen sign language in a movie. And it was just a revelation for me. It was this model, this idea of deaf people signing American Sign Language on film in the movies. And so as years progressed, I was able to direct and begin to write plays, but inside movies, film was really my passion. And I always had the itch. It was always there. And I had directed and produced 2 plays at the Indiana School for the Deaf. And so I spoke with my wife and I said, I know that I can direct movies. And she believed in me, and so we went ahead and took out a second mortgage, a loan off the equity of our home, and began ASL Films. And really, I'm entirely self-taught. Everything that I've learned has been via the internet and my own personal research until I met a mentor, Peter Wolf, who took me under his wing. He's from Hollywood, and really began to lead me through my process, show me my mistakes, and begin to grow me as a director. The story has always been important to me with films. That's always been an issue. But of course, the barrier when it comes to film is that I'm deaf and I can't hear the music. And I realize how important sound and music is to create a successful film. And so I wanted to find someone who can hear and understands the concept of sound production and how that affects a movie, but also would be would help to make my goal and my dream of art as successful in deaf film. And so, as I've said, I really feel that film, for me, there's no rules. There's no rules that one has to follow. Really, it really is an art form, a free art form. My scripts, for example, I'd say that 90% of the scenes and all come purely from a visual medium. I think about the cinematography and the picture that I want to paint. That's always the first part of the process. And then later, I figure out what it is I want to say there. The story comes along afterwards. And so I always I'll try to shoot things, as it were, in my head, and kind of come to a feeling of, this is the story I want to tell, this is the picture I want to paint. And then I'll move it into a written form via English in the script, but then I'll let the actors take it from there and move it back from a written English form into American Sign Language, the visual form. And it's been interesting to see how sometimes their interpretation of the English I've put down is not the same as the vision that I originally cast. And so we begin to work together, because really my goal is that the final product, once it's there on the big screen, what all the inner mechanisms, all the behind the scenes work, that's not the most important. The whole goal is the final product. So I grew up in New York, and I attended the residential school for the deaf in Lexington. It was probably 11th grade before I took my first poetry class in ASL storytelling with Peter Cook, who is a deaf artist from Chicago. And I have to say that really was a life-changing event for me, to create one's own stories and poetry, but I kind of put that on hold until about 8 years ago, until I finally was able to rediscover my inner artist, as it were. And I started attending ASL Slam, which was an open mic that was established about 10 years ago. And I began to attend and became a regular, and I had people coming up to me saying, "You have it. This is something you need to do for a career." And so it created this deep desire and drive for me, and it helped me to fuel my passion and creativity. Illustration and anime, Japanese anime, these fantastic characters with these wonderful expressions, that really kind of inspired me to begin to play with our visual language and to show via my body and all of the signs, to show this picture, to paint the picture of this character that you can just see clearly. I don't have to give you more than that. You're able to see it clearly, whether you understand sign language or not. And I gain my inspiration from a variety of sources, which I think appeals to a broader audience as well, for people who don't sign, for those who can hear and speak, for those who are hearing bilinguals. And I don't like to give you everything, all at once. A lot of what I do is mime. Sometimes when collaborating with musicians, I have them follow my signs, as opposed to, we see on YouTube all of these videos, these ASL music videos, these horrible renditions of English songs, whereas I feel it's better in this visual vernacular that the music matches my signs, and I feel that that creates far more visual interest and auditory interest. Additionally, when we talk about different forms of poetry, moving from ASL from ASL to English, you really can't cross over. They're totally different creatures. You have a beautiful poem in English, and then you try and put it into American Sign Language, and it isn't beautiful anymore. And I think that's true anytime you move from one language to another. Something is lost in translation. And so I feel it's better to leave things as is in their purest form and let people experience them and interpret them for themselves. One of the things I've been working on is trying to have ASL poetry in 15 seconds or less. And, try to even make it do 10 seconds. But really, ASL poetry tends to be 2 to 3 minutes long, simply because of the grammar of our language. But you see these impactful poetry or quotes that are one or two lines. It's one line, but I've come up with only one so far. For example, this one. And leave it at that.